Welcome to Mr. Brown's Basement, a channel devoted to sharing the craft of repairing, restoring, and modifying vintage electronic gear, and other random stuff.
Some of the screenshots in this video contain screen flicker. If you are sensitive to flicker or have photosensitive epilepsy, please choose to watch another of my videos and not this one.
In this video, I'm going to be setting up my Macintosh IIci
To work with my Apple Portrait monitor.
I picked up this machine from a fellow collector in Toronto. It's nice to see young people interested in equipment like this. They weren't even around when these machines were in use. He had already done some of the necessary maintenance. He already replaced the reefer capacitors in the power supply, and he also replaced the SMD electrolytics. Let's take a look inside.
The Macintosh IIci was considered a real workhorse at the time, combining good value for a reasonable amount of power. It was on the market for almost 4 years, which is among the longest for any Macintosh computer.
It wasn't quite as fast as the Macintosh IIFX, but the case was much smaller. This case was only used on the IIci IIcX and the successor, the Quadra 700. It has 3 Nubus expansion slots, slot for a cache memory, which I don't have yet,
An optional ROM SIM.
It also has 8 slots for RAM. You populate them in 2 sets of 4. Currently, I believe it has 8 megabytes, and it's expandable to 128. They're 30-pin SIM modules. What it lacks is a hard drive. This is a SCSI hard drive. I'm not going to get into the specifications of this machine. That information is readily available on the internet. But let's just say that if you had to choose between the IIci, which is this one, or the IIcX, definitely get the IIci. It's much faster, and it has onboard video. You don't have to waste one of your Nubus slots for a video card on a IIci when you would have to on a IIcX. I've liberated the power supply, which is held in by a latch, and the drive assembly as well. I wanted to see if the battery had been removed and what was put in its place, and that is a button battery, a 2032, which is a very sensible solution. It contains much less electrolyte than the old half AAs did, and if it were to explode, it's not going to make as big a mess. You can see that there is some evidence of corrosion inside the case. In fact, much of the shield has been removed. I suspect it had been damaged by a leaking or exploding battery. That is something that always needs to be dealt with these old computers. So the 3.5-inch hard drive fits on this clip, really easy to remove. Excellent design. My only complaint with these machines is they used plastic that gets brittle over time. The plastic pieces just break off really easily. You have to be very careful with things like the locking tabs. Now, I understand this machine is a little out of its warranty, but still it would have been nice if they had used a better plastic. Since this system has no hard drive, I took this one out of storage. It's a 3.5-inch Connor 40 megabyte hard drive. And as you can see, this is a Apple drive, which means that it will be recognized by the Apple system utilities. Drives that did not have Apple's ROMs in them would not be recognized, and you'd have to use a third-party utility to format it.
These header pins are for setting the SCSI ID number of the drive. The SCSI ID number of the system or host is 7. Usually, the SCSI ID number of the internal drive is set to 0, so none of these header pins need to be jumpered together. And a pair of these header pins, I think these, but I'm not sure yet, is for the drive activity LED.
It's also important that the terminator resistors are in place, because on an old Apple SCSI bus, it's expected that there's termination at both ends. So at the internal drive end, and if you have more things hooked up at that end too. This drive hasn't been powered up in probably 20 years, so I Don't know whether it works. It certainly worked when I put it away. Older drives can fail to spin up, or they can have other problems. Hopefully this drive works. Let's give it a go. That sounds right.
While I'm doing the testing, I'm going to use this Apple Color display monitor. It's only 14 inches, but it will have to do.
Okay, that's good. So now I can go about putting an operating system on this hard drive. I can put any system on this computer from system software version 6.04 to version 7.61. If I want maximum speed, then version 6, but for maximum usability, version 7. I don't know what these are, so we'll find out. I suspect they're version 7. It turns out to be system 7.1, which is perfect.
It looks like I'm missing one of the disks, so the installation will not proceed.
So instead, it looks like system 7.5, which is just a little bit more. I'm keeping the drive out just in case it decides to fail and I have to find another drive. Another option if you're restoring a computer like this is to use something called a blue SCSI. It's a device that has a SCSI connector at one end and a micro SD card at the other. I've seen it work on one occasion and I was quite impressed. The installation is complete. Before I go any further, I want to do some benchmarks on the machine. So this is system 7.5, nothing added or taken away, and I'll be using speedometer 4.01. So the machine as it is runs at just under half the speed of a Quadra 605. I want to see if I can squeeze more performance out of this machine, so I'm going to install this Nubus card. It's an Apple Macintosh 4.8 display card.
It may make a small difference to the overall performance because it's freeing up motherboard memory, which is currently being used as screen buffer. But the main reason I'm using it is to get more bit depth, in other words, more colors or shades of gray. This extra memory will be super important when I connect up the Portrait display.
The first thing immediately obvious is that I can choose not just 8-bit color, but 16-bit color, which is millions of colors. The system is now together. I'm still waiting for the cache card to arrive, and I'll probably do some benchmarks when it arrives. But the next thing to look at is the monitor that goes with this, which is not this thing, but a much nicer monitor. I want to make sure that there are no capacitors bulging or waiting to blow up, anything like that. The monitor is a big one. Here it is, the Apple Portrait monitor. It's monochrome with white colored phosphor, and it's absolutely perfect when you want to edit or review a single page at a time, because the proportions of the screen are the same as the proportions of the page. I used this monitor quite a bit when I first got it, almost 30 years ago. It was really a pleasure to use. On the back, it's got a very unusual video in, and it's got 3 ADB connectors. So you connect the computer to this, and then this to the keyboard and or mouse. Very nice design. Thank you, Apple. On the bottom, you have this, which fits the stand, prevents it from moving, and legs that prop it up. 2 screws here to open, and 2 screws over there to open. I don't think any surprise screws. I've never opened this up before. I guess there's more for me to take apart. It's totally enclosed in a metal shield. After taking off 3 screws, I could get off the back part of the shield. It's got some big electrolytics in it, and some small ones too. But the whole purpose of this visit was to look for capacitors that could explode. None of these look bulged at all. And these are the line capacitors here. And these little blue ones. So there are no reef capacitors there. Just some dust on the flyback, which is what's expected. I'll get rid of that. On this assembly, in this block over here, there could be line capacitors too, and actually I can see that there are. But that is a sealed unit, and if that were to fail, I'd have to replace the whole thing. I've seen those. I think they're about $10 or so. Nice design. But at least if they explode or if they begin to smoke, I think that's completely sealed. I don't think I'd ever know. Maybe I would hear something or it would just stop working. If they shorted it, they would probably blow the chokes inside. I'm not worried about that. I think I can just dust this and put it back together. For those wondering about what kind of picture tube it is, there's the picture tube type. I've never seen that number before. One last look at the controls on the side. Sub, bright, gain, and bias. And the controls on the back. Horizontal centering, horizontal phase, height, vertical linearity, vertical centering, and side pin. Maybe it's pin cushion distortion, I don't know. The Mac IIci and IIcx and a small number of others have an auxiliary plug right over here, so you can plug the monitor into the computer and not worry about having to turn the monitor on and off separately. Now, isn't that a beauty? It almost looks like it was meant to look that way. Wait till I put it on its stand. But let's test it out first. I really like this.
Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. Back to the video.
I've added an extension called Lefty. It reverses the direction of the Macintosh system pointer, which is useful for about 5 or 10% of the population, including me.
And the Shutdown Effects 1.3 extension, which is just so cool.
Well, there it is on its stand, next to its big brother, a 2FX. That 2FX may be the topic of a future video. If I can hire a crane to lift the monitor off the computer, we'll see. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to Mr. Brown's Basement for more interesting and unusual videos.